Billionaire CEO saw his secretary crying on a blind date with only $10. Then he whispered, "I can stay with you tonight." She thought it was just another blind date, until the man vanished, leaving her with the bill, and only $10 in her purse. But the moment she broke down, someone else saw her. Not just any man, her billionaire boss. And with one quiet whisper, everything changed. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. "I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for your meal." The words came from the man across the table, not a whisper, not a joke, but loud enough to silence the laughter from the nearby booths. Evelyn's cheeks flushed a deep, unforgiving red. She tried to smile to make sense of it. "Wait, is this part of the date?" she asked gently, as if the embarrassment might vanish if she stayed kind. Derek leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "You ordered the steak and the wine. I only had a salad. I think it's fair we split it." He shrugged, then reached into his blazer and tossed a $20 bill on the table like a tip he didn't care about. "I've got to use the bathroom," he added. "Back in a sec." But she knew, by the way he avoided her eyes. By the stiffness in his walk, by how the door swung closed behind him, and didn't swing open again. She sat in the expensive Italian restaurant, alone, abandoned, with a $76 check in front of her and exactly $10 in her purse. Evelyn Monroe had never been the kind of woman who chased attention. Not in high school, not at work, and certainly not on this blind date, which her cousin had begged her to try after too many nights home with tea and your cat, Evelyn. Her cousin had set her up with Derek Langston, procurement 2 floors up. They had never spoken at the office, but technically, he was a co-worker. She hadn't expected sparks or soulmates, but she hadn't expected to be ditched either. Her eyes burned as she pulled out her wallet, fingers shaking. Inside, tucked beside the $10 bill, was a worn silver locket, her mother's. She pressed her thumb against it, breathing slowly. "Don't cry in public," she whispered to herself. But her card had been declined twice, and she couldn't even afford a cab ride home. She felt her dignity unravel, quietly, invisibly, painfully. She pushed her chair back, ready to apologize to the waiter and offer, what? A promise to come back tomorrow? That's when she heard his voice. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" She turned, and the moment felt like a glitch in time. He wasn't the manager or the waiter. He wasn't even someone she knew. The man standing beside her wore a charcoal suit like it had been designed for his frame. His jaw was sharp, clean-shaven. His eyes, his steel blue, calm, assessing, held hers with a quiet force that said, "I see you." Her voice caught. I think I've made a mistake." He glanced at the bill, the empty chair across from her, then back to her trembling hands. "I can stay with you tonight," he said softly, lowering himself into Derek's seat. "So you don't have to sit alone," Evelyn blinked. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said. He waved the waiter over and handed him a sleek silver card. "Put it all on this, please, and bring the lady whatever dessert she likes." The waiter nodded and vanished. Evelyn was too stunned to argue. Her hands clutched the locket inside her purse like a lifeline. "Who are you?" she finally asked. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, more like the echo of one. "Julian Hartman." She froze. The Julian Hartman, CEO of Hartman Enterprises. The man her co-workers at the office whispered about when his name popped up on memos. The billionaire, the ghost in the executive wing who never came down to their floor. Her boss. "You're Evelyn, right?" he asked casually, picking up the wine glass Derek had left behind and sniffing it. "Monroe, you're new. You just joined 3 months ago." She was too stunned to reply. "You helped organize the call sheets for the charity gala last week," he added. And you color-code your calendar like it's the Sistine Chapel. Evelyn choked on a laugh. It came out wet, half despair, half relief. I do, she admitted. Julian tilted his head. I figured. The dessert arrived. Tiramisu, tall and delicate, dusted with cocoa. Julian didn't touch it, but he waited, watching her until she finally picked up the spoon. The first bite was sweet, but not just because of the sugar. It was the way he made it feel like she wasn't a fool for being here. Do men always leave you with the check? He asked lightly, but not mockingly. Evelyn shook her head. This was my first blind date. Then you're getting the full tour. That made her laugh again. Soft. Surprised, he leaned forward. Let me guess. You let someone talk you into it. You've been too busy for dating, probably taking care of someone else. She stiffened. How did you? Your dress is modest, your shoes are practical, and there's a prescription receipt poking out of your purse? She looked down. And sure enough, the edge of a pharmacy printout was peeking from the zipper. Her fingers pushed it back quickly. My mother? She said after a beat. She's been in and out of the hospital. I've been covering most of the bills. My card got declined tonight because... She stopped, cheeks burning again. But Julian didn't flinch. He nodded, like it all made perfect sense now. You're not embarrassed, she realized. He looked straight at her. No, I'm angry. Why? Because you were trying. Because you showed up. Because that guy, he motioned toward the empty seat, doesn't deserve to even share oxygen with you, let alone a dinner table. Silence sat between them. A few tables down, someone laughed. Someone clinked a glass, but at their table it felt still, safe. When the waiter returned with the paycheck and a fresh cup of coffee, Julian stood. I'll walk you out, he said. You don't have to. I know. He picked up the cream cardigan she'd hung behind her chair and draped it over her shoulders, gently, as if she were made of porcelain. Her eyes flicked up to his. For a moment, she forgot how exhausted she was. They stepped into the night. The air was crisp, the street lamps soft. Do you need a ride home? He asked. She hesitated. Her pride was already in tatters, but she nodded. Please? His car wasn't flashy. Just a sleek black SUV with leather seats and soft jazz playing low in the background. They didn't talk much on the drive, just comfortable silence interrupted by small details. You live in Willow Park? Yes, apartment 2B. I went to school near there. Oh? When they pulled up to her building, he turned off the engine but didn't rush to open the door. You don't have to say anything, he said, but if you ever need someone to walk you through another bad date, I'm available. This time she smiled for real. Do you usually offer emotional rescue missions to your employees? Only the exceptional ones. He handed her something before she got out, a folded napkin with his phone number, and beneath it, her silver locket. He had noticed it slip from her purse and picked it up without a word. Don't lose this, he said. It looks like it matters. Her throat tightened. It does. She got out of the car, heart racing, locket in hand. Upstairs, as she leaned against her apartment door, the napkin still clenched in her palm, Evelyn whispered to herself, that didn't feel real. She reached for her phone to text her cousin, to say something, anything. But just then, her screen lit up with an email. From hrhartmanenterprises.com. Subject, inappropriate relationship allegation. Her heart stopped. She opened it, and the words blurred. The timestamp showed the complaint was filed minutes after the restaurant charge just posted. It has come to our attention that you were seen dining with Julian Hartman last evening. Due to company policy regarding workplace relationships, you are being placed under immediate review. She blinked. Reread it. Again. Her fingers trembled. Someone had reported her. But who? The subject line still pulsed on her phone screen like a warning, inappropriate relationship allegation. Evelyn stood frozen in her tiny kitchen, the overhead light humming faintly above her. The locket Julian had returned now lay on the counter, its delicate chain curled like a question mark. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Should she call someone? Julian? But what would she even say? "Hi, sorry about the lovely evening. Turns out someone reported us to HR." She closed her eyes, exhaled slowly. This had to be a mistake, a misinterpretation. They hadn't even touched hands. He paid for a meal. They talked. That was all. And yet, someone saw, someone judged, someone wanted her gone. At 8:04 a.m. sharp, she walked into the office with her head held high. The Hartman Enterprises building gleamed like something out of a futuristic dream. All glass. Steel and quiet ambition. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon oil and power. Evelyn passed the front desk and headed straight to the elevator, avoiding eye contact with anyone she passed. Whispers had already begun. She could feel them trail behind her like perfume. "She's the one, right? The secretary who went to dinner with the CEO? I heard she spent the night with him. Apparently, he drove her home. Scandalous." Her jaw clenched. She said nothing. She pressed the button for the 7th floor, her floor, admin and executive support. As the elevator climbed, so did her heartbeat. When the doors opened, someone was waiting for her. Ms. Monroe? A tall woman in a navy blue blazer and tight bun stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Her badge read, Andrea Klein, HR Compliance Lead. Evelyn straightened her spine. "Yes? Mr. Hartman has requested to meet with you, his office. Now." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Right now? Right now. Julian Hartman's office wasn't on the 7th floor. It was on the top, 21st. The elevator ride was silent, except for Andrea's fingers tapping on her tablet. "Am I being fired?" Evelyn asked softly. Andrea glanced at her, not coldly but with unreadable professionalism. "You're being heard." The doors opened with a soft chime. Evelyn had never been up here before. The top floor was sleek, minimal, sun-drenched. No cubicles, no clutter. Just a few glass-walled offices, a private conference room, and one large corner suite at the end of the hall. Julian's. Andrea opened the door and motioned her inside. Evelyn stepped through and saw him. He stood by the tall windows, hands in his pockets, his suit flawless as ever, eyes shadowed by the morning light. "Thank you, Andrea," he said, without turning. Andrea gave Evelyn a tight nod and closed the door behind her. Julian turned slowly. His expression wasn't angry, but it wasn't relaxed either. It was the look of a man carefully weighing every word. "Before I say anything," he began, "are you okay?" That stopped her cold. She nodded, but her voice came out rough. "I don't understand what's happening." Julian motioned to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She did. He sat across from her, folding his hands over a leather portfolio. "I received a report early this morning," he said. "Anonymous complaint, claiming that you and I are engaged in an inappropriate relationship." Evelyn looked down. "Because of dinner. Because someone saw us at dinner and decided to make it a scandal." Her chest tightened. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Julian said firmly, "and neither did I." She blinked. He continued, his tone calm but clear. "I've already spoken to the board. I made it clear that I invited you to dinner after witnessing an unacceptable situation involving another man. I also disclosed that I paid for the meal and drove you home. I was transparent. By the book." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Why are they still investigating me then?" Julian's jaw flexed. "Because you're not the CEO," he said simply. "You don't have the same shield I do." Silence fell until she whispered, "So what happens now?" Julian leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you 2 things." Her breath caught. "1, a formal statement clearing your name. You'll keep your job. Your record stays clean. And 2," he hesitated, "transfer to another department, far from me. That's the condition the board gave, to eliminate distraction." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. So I'm punished for being seen. His eyes flickered with something close to pain. I'm trying to protect you, Evelyn. By sending me away? By keeping your career from being crushed? She stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. I should have paid the bill myself. Evelyn, she turned to go, but her fingers trembled again as they reached the doorknob. Is that really what this company stands for? She asked. Reputation over truth? She didn't wait for an answer. 2 hours later, she sat alone in the company cafe, a modest coffee and plain bagel untouched in front of her. The cafe was bright, with pale wood counters and warm lighting. Normally it was her safe space during long mornings, but now it felt too quiet, too watchful. She reached into her purse, thumb brushing the silver locket again. When her phone buzzed, she barely glanced at it, assuming it was another office memo. But it wasn't. From Julian Hartman, subject, FYI. You were right. It wasn't a random complaint. Someone sent a photo, attached. You may want to see this. Her fingers went cold. She opened the image. Her heart stopped. It was a photo of last night. Grainy, clearly taken from across the restaurant. Evelyn mid-laugh, Julian seated beside her, the napkin with his number visible on the table. But the file name chilled her more. Langston Evidence JPG. Derek, her date? He didn't just leave the table. He set her up. Evelyn couldn't feel her legs. She sat frozen in the staff cafe, eyes glued to the grainy photo Derek had taken. The angle was low, clearly taken from across the restaurant. A stalker's photo masquerading as evidence. She looked happy. That's what cut the deepest. The Evelyn in that photo wasn't the crying woman from an hour before. She was smiling, laughing even, looking at Julian like he was a lifeboat she didn't expect, but desperately needed. And Derek had caught that moment. Used it. She stared at the file name again. Langston Evidence JPG. So this wasn't just a cowardly escape. It was deliberate. He had planned to humiliate her. Her phone buzzed again. Julian Hartman. I'll be in the downstairs cafe in 10. You should see this in person. She looked up. She was already there. A few moments later, she saw him walking toward her. Navy blue tie loosened slightly, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His presence shifted the entire energy of the cafe. Conversations dipped, heads turned, but he didn't look at anyone else, just her. He sat down, sliding his phone across the table. He emailed that photo to HR last night from a burner account. We traced the IP. It was Derek, she whispered. Julian nodded. He labeled you as a gold digger trying to seduce a superior for job security. Later, forensics tied the street photo to a PR fixer on Sasha's payroll. Evelyn swallowed the burn rising in her throat. Why would he do that? Julian didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. Maybe, he said finally, he couldn't handle the fact that you left with dignity after he left you with nothing. Her fingers clenched around her coffee cup. It had gone cold. The silver locket brushed against her wrist as she shifted. And Julian's eyes followed the motion. Was it hers? He asked softly. Evelyn nodded. My mother's. She gave it to me the day she was diagnosed. Her voice trembled. Said, if I ever felt like I was disappearing, like life was swallowing me whole, I should hold on to something that reminded me I mattered. He didn't respond right away. But then his hand reached across the table, and not to touch hers, but to gently slide the cup closer to her. You're not disappearing, Evelyn, he said. You're just starting to be seen. Later that afternoon, she found an envelope on her desk. No name, no logo. Inside, a note. Let's even the playing field. Come to conference room B at 6 p.m. Bring your voice. JH. She didn't know what he had planned, but at exactly 5:57 p.m., she stood outside conference room B, heart hammering. The glass windows were fogged from the inside, lights on. Something was happening. She pushed open the door and stopped short. Inside, half the executive team was gathered, including 2 HR officers, Julian's assistant Naomi, and to her shock, Derek Langston. He looked completely at ease, like this was his meeting. But when Julian saw her, he stood. "Evelyn," he said calmly, "come in." A chair had been set aside for her at the end of the table. Not at the back, at the head. Julian turned to the room. "I called this meeting to address a complaint," he said. "One filed by a Mr. Derek Langston against a staff member, Ms. Evelyn Monroe, accusing her of improper conduct and attempting to leverage personal relationships for career gain." A murmur moved through the room. Derek smirked. "And?" Julian's smile was sharp. "And I've invited Evelyn to respond directly, in her own words." All eyes turned to her. Evelyn stood, legs shaking beneath her blouse and pencil skirt. She reached for the locket instinctively. "Last night," she said, voice steadying with each word, "I went on a blind date that ended badly. The man left me at the table after refusing to pay for what he ordered, knowing I couldn't cover the bill. That man was Derek Langston." Gasps. Derek's face twitched. "You can't prove—" But Julian held up a finger. "Let her finish," Evelyn continued. "Mister. Hartman stepped in when he saw me crying. He stayed, not as my boss, but as a decent person. He paid for the meal. He offered me a ride home so I wouldn't walk alone at night with no money. That was all." She turned to HR. There was no romantic involvement, no impropriety, only dignity and decency. She reached into her purse and held up her phone. "I have messages from Derek leading up to the date. He knew about my mother's condition. He asked about my salary. He pretended to be interested, then left me vulnerable. And then he took this." She passed the printed copy of the photo to HR. "Evidence," he called it, "but it's just a punishment for not playing along." The room went dead silent. Then Julian stepped forward again. "I'll be requesting a full investigation into Derek Langston's behavior," he said coolly, "including misuse of internal resources to escalate false claims. Effective immediately, he is suspended pending review." Derek's chair scraped back. "You can't do this!" But Naomi was already standing. "Security's waiting outside, Mr. Langston." And just like that, he was out. Later that evening, as the building emptied, Evelyn lingered in the conference room, watching the lights dim one by one. Julian returned, sleeves still rolled, now with 2 paper cups in his hands. "I figured this might be a 2-coffee kind of day," she smiled. Softly, he handed her the cup. "Decaf, almond milk, right?" Her eyebrows lifted. "You remember?" "I read your personnel file," he said with a shrug. "Twice." She sipped. It was perfect. They sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "I meant what I said. You deserve to be seen." Her fingers brushed the locket again. "And heard." Julian's gaze held hers. "You have a beautiful voice, Evelyn." Her cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment, but something warmer, quieter, hope. But then her phone buzzed again, a text, unknown number. "Just because he covered for you doesn't mean it's over. You think he's your savior? He's just covering his tracks." Attached, a blurry photo of Julian standing outside her building last night, head turned, watching her walk inside. Her stomach flipped. Someone else had been watching. Someone else had followed them. The moment Evelyn read the threatening text, her entire body turned cold. Just because he covered for you doesn't mean it's over. You think he's your savior? He's just covering his tracks? Attached. A blurry photo of Julian standing outside her building, watching. Someone had followed them. Someone knew. Someone wanted to twist it into something it wasn't. She sat back against the couch in her tiny living room. The lamp beside her, casting a tired yellow glow across the room. The cat, Lily, curled against her side, purring softly, unaware of the tension tightening her chest. This wasn't over. But who was it now? Derek was out, suspended. And no one had seen him in the building since the meeting. Was it someone else in the company? A rival? A jealous co-worker? Or worse, someone from Julian's world? The next morning, Evelyn requested the day off. Her mother, Teresa, had been taken back to the hospital overnight, her breathing shallow, her blood pressure dropping. Evelyn spent the entire morning in the dull blue waiting room of St. George's Medical, clutching a paper coffee cup that had long since gone cold. The nurses knew her by name now. She sat beside the bed as the machines beeped steadily, her mother asleep under thin blankets, a trace of oxygen hissing beside her. The silver locket glinted faintly against Evelyn's cardigan. She touched it, like always. "You gave me this," she whispered, "so I wouldn't forget who I was." But today, she didn't feel strong. She didn't feel seen. She felt tired and scared. Her phone vibrated. "Julian, I heard you're out today. Are you all right?" She stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Not really. My mom's in the hospital again." Julian, "Do you want company?" Evelyn hesitated, then typed, "Come after 6. Bring real food. Cafeteria coffee is a crime." At 6:17 p.m., there was a soft knock on the door of room 304. Evelyn opened it, and there he was. No suit, no tie, just a deep navy sweater over a crisp white shirt. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. In one hand, a paper bag from a family-owned Italian place across town. "Smells like heaven," she said, voice low. Julian smiled almost sheepishly. "Rigatoni and garlic bread. They said it's comfort food with soul. I figured you might need both." They sat together on the tiny hospital room love seat. The food spread between them. Teresa slept through it all, the soft rhythm of her breathing providing a strange kind of comfort. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly. "For the food? For showing up." He looked at her for a moment, longer than was appropriate, but not long enough to feel wrong. "I don't like hospitals," he said suddenly. "They smell like regrets and waiting." She glanced over. His tone had shifted. "My dad died in one," he continued. "Pancreatic cancer. I was 22. I didn't make it in time to say goodbye." Evelyn set down her fork. Julian rarely shared. He spoke like a man used to holding stories close. But tonight, something had cracked. "My mom never forgave me for missing it. Said I cared more about boardrooms than deathbeds." "That's not fair." "No," he said softly. But it was true. The silence sat between them. Not heavy, not awkward, just real. "Do you ever let anyone in, Julian?" she asked. He looked at her, almost startled. Not because of the question, but because she said his name like it mattered. "I didn't," he said, a pause. "Until recently." She felt the breath catch in her throat. He stood then, walked to the edge of her mother's bed, and, gently, reverently, picked up the silver locket from where it had slipped off Evelyn's lap. "You wear this like armor," he said. "It's not just jewelry." Evelyn nodded, tears threatening. "She wore it every day for 40 years. She told me once that it held pieces of my father's voice, that when he died, she would press it to her chest and remember how he laughed." Julian didn't move. "Does it work?" he asked. Evelyn managed a smile. On good days, he placed the locket in her hands with care. "I hope today becomes one of them." Back at her apartment later that night, Evelyn got another message. From unknown. "He always runs when things get hard. Just wait. It's coming." Attached was another photo, but this time it wasn't blurry. It was crystal clear. Julian kissing a woman, not Evelyn, a tall, glamorous brunette in a red dress, her hands on his chest, his lips brushing hers. The timestamp? 3 nights ago? The night after their dinner? Evelyn's throat tightened. Was this real? Her hands trembled as she scrolled down. Another message. "She's back, and he's lying to you." There was no signature, but Evelyn stared at the photo for a long time, until her vision blurred and the locket slipped through her fingers onto the floor. Evelyn barely slept. The photo kept resurfacing behind her closed eyes. Julian, her Julian, kissing a woman in a red dress. The timestamp didn't lie. 3 nights ago, one day after he promised she was seen. One day after he returned her mother's locket like it meant something. But who was the woman? And why did it feel like this had been sent to hurt her, not inform her? She could have screamed, but she didn't. She could have deleted the photo, but she didn't. She just sat, alone on her living room floor, the silver locket resting in her palm, and a truth she didn't want to admit ringing in her ears. He still belongs to another world, and maybe I don't have a place in it. The next morning, Evelyn didn't return to work. She took the train to St. George's Hospital instead. Her mother had stabilized enough to be moved out of ICU, but Evelyn needed more than that. She needed her mother's voice, even if it was fading. Inside the room, Teresa looked fragile but warm. She smiled faintly when Evelyn walked in, motioning to the nightstand. A sealed envelope sat there with her name on it. "Just in case I'm asleep when you need to hear me," Teresa whispered, her hand barely brushing Evelyn's. Evelyn blinked back tears and opened it. "My Evie, if you're reading this, I know something's hurting you. Maybe someone's disappointed you. That happens, it always does. Even the good ones fall short sometimes. But I want you to remember something, darling. Dignity isn't silence. It's choosing the words you won't regret saying later. Don't let pride swallow love, and don't let fantasy blind you to truth. Ask the hard question, and if he flinches, you'll know. I love you always." Mom Evelyn folded the letter slowly, pressing it against her chest. Then, without overthinking, she took a photo of the locket in her hand and sent a message to Julian. "We need to talk. I need the truth. Please meet me at my apartment at 7. Just you. Just honesty." She didn't wait for a reply. She just hoped. At exactly 7:01 p.m., she heard the knock. She opened the door slowly, and there he was. Same sweater from the hospital visit, same quiet warmth, but something behind his eyes looked different now, like he already knew what was coming. "You're upset," Julian said gently. "You kissed someone?" she replied. No smile, no hesitation. She held out her phone. The image displayed clearly. Julian stepped inside and looked down at the screen. A long pause. Then, "Yes, I did." She flinched. His voice remained steady. "Her name is Sasha Laurent. She's my ex-fiancée." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "I hadn't seen her in over a year. That photo, it's real, but it's also incomplete." Julian walked to her small kitchen table, the same one they'd shared coffee at before, and set his keys down. "She showed up at my building unannounced, said she was in town and wanted to catch up. I agreed to a drink, stupidly. Thought closure might be civil." He looked up. "I was wrong." Evelyn crossed her arms tightly. "And the kiss?" Julian sighed. "It wasn't mutual." "She looks pretty mutual," he nodded. "She always was. Performative." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned it toward her. Security footage, building lobby, date stamped the same night. Julian stepping back from Sasha, visibly wiping his mouth, walking away. "She sent the photo to my old PR manager the next day," he added. "I told her never to contact me again." Evelyn stared at the screen. Her breath eased, not completely, but enough to stand straight again. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't think I deserved to," he said quietly, "and because part of me thought maybe we weren't anything yet." "Just coffee, kindness, silence in hospital rooms." He looked down. "But you were right to ask." A pause. Then Evelyn stepped closer, not to touch him, but to hold out the silver locket between them. "If I asked you to hold this again," she said, voice soft, "would you tell me the truth before it got hard?" He looked at it. At her. "I'd hold it," he said, "and I wouldn't let go." They sat together that night, not as employer and employee, not as fantasy and reality, just two people sitting close on a modest apartment couch, sharing simple pasta and soft music humming from an old speaker. She told him more about her mom. He told her what it felt like to be publicly adored and privately empty. Neither tried to fix the other. They just listened. And for the first time, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe love didn't have to shout. Maybe it whispered. But just as Julian stood to leave, he looked down at his phone and froze. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. He turned the screen to her. It was a company-wide internal email. Urgent, unauthorized investigation, and confidential data breach. Hartman Enterprises regrets to announce that an internal ethics complaint has been filed against CEO Julian Hartman, alleging abuse of access and manipulation of internal systems to suppress an HR report. This includes retaliation against former employee Derek Langston and digital tampering involving Evelyn Monroe's personnel file. Her blood ran cold. What does that mean? Julian's face was pale. "It means," he said, "someone just declared war." Julian stared at the screen like he'd been punched. Unauthorized investigation, retaliation, personnel, tampering. They weren't just ugly words. They were explosive. In corporate language, this was a loaded gun. Evelyn read the email again, every line making her stomach churn. Her name was right there, buried in legal phrasing and veiled accusations. She was part of it now, not just collateral, central. She looked up at him. Who would do this? Julian's jaw tightened. "There are people who've been waiting for a reason to take me down. All they needed was a story." "And you think Derek did this?" Derek was a symptom, not the hand pulling the strings. He turned away, pacing her tiny living room like it was a courtroom floor. "I made enemies when I took over, cut bonuses, changed policies, consolidated power. They smiled in meetings, toasted with champagne, and waited." Evelyn crossed her arms, heartbeat picking up. "So now they're using me to frame you." He stopped pacing, turned, and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not as someone caught in the storm, but someone standing in it beside him. "No," he said quietly, "they're using me to break you." By morning, the story had leaked to the press. It was only a whisper, for now, tucked inside a finance blog with blurry screenshots and carefully worded accusations. Billionaire CEO under internal ethics review, favoritism, and HR bypass at Hartman Enterprises. Julian didn't come into the office that day, but Evelyn did, wearing her most neutral blouse, her hair pinned tight, and the silver locket worn outside her clothes. Not hidden, a statement, a shield. Ki. The stares returned. So did the whispers. But this time, she didn't flinch. At 9:02 a.m., she stepped off the elevator to find Naomi, Julian's executive assistant, standing by the glass wall of the executive conference room. Naomi was elegant, tall, composed, the kind of woman who knew where every skeleton was buried. And who put them there? Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw Evelyn. "You should be home," Naomi said, arms folded. "And let the story write itself?" Evelyn replied. Naomi's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're brave. I'll give you that." "I'm not brave," Evelyn said softly. "I'm just done being quiet." Naomi tilted her head. "You really think he's worth this? The late nights, the headlines, the judgment?" Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. That afternoon, she made her way to Julian's penthouse. Not the office, not his building, his home. He opened the door with the same look he wore in meetings. Unreadable. But his voice gave him away. "You shouldn't be here." "You didn't answer your phone," she said. He stepped aside, let her in. The space was airy, modern, but not cold. Leather, deep blues, art on the walls. Nothing flashy, nothing arrogant. Just lived in. There was coffee brewing. He poured her a mug and handed it over. "You came to lecture me?" he asked. "I came to offer you this." She held out the locket, gently, the chain curled in her palm. Julian stared at it. "I can't take that." "You gave it back to me when I felt small," she said. "Let me give it to you now, before they try to do the same to you." Silence. Then he reached out and took it, not with possession, but with reverence. He closed his fingers around it and whispered, "You don't know what this means." "I think I do." Later that night, as the sun dipped low over the skyline, Evelyn sat across from him at the kitchen island. There were no private chefs, no silver platters, just scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced strawberries. "I didn't know what else to cook," he said. "This is perfect." They ate in silence for a moment, the good kind. Soft jazz played somewhere in the background. The city lights twinkled like a universe outside their window. She looked up at him. "What if they call a board hearing?" "They will." "What happens if you lose?" He hesitated. "Everything." She studied him, and then, like flipping a switch inside herself, Evelyn said, "Then tell them everything. About Derek, about Sasha, about me." Julian's brows lifted. "You're willing to be in the room?" "I'm willing," she said, "but I won't be silent." The next morning, she got the official memo. Board hearing, 10 a.m. Governor, executive level. Conference room. As she arrived 5 minutes early, Julian was already there, in a dark navy suit, silver cufflinks. He looked composed, present, powerful. Around the table, 5 board members, 2 lawyers, 1 HR rep, and to Evelyn's surprise, Naomi. Julian opened with calm confidence. He laid out the timeline, named Derek directly. Confirmed Sasha's reappearance, offered security footage. Emails. Then, it was Evelyn's turn. She stood slowly, took a breath. "My name is Evelyn Monroe. I was hired 3 months ago as a junior secretary in admin support. On the night in question, I was abandoned during a blind date by a man who intentionally left me with a bill I couldn't pay. Julian, Mr. Hartman, saw me crying and stepped in." She looked directly at the oldest board member, a woman in pearl earrings with skeptical eyes. "He didn't touch me. He didn't promise me anything. He gave me dignity, that's all." Naomi leaned forward, speaking for the first time. "Did he ever offer you a promotion, compensation, preferential treatment?" "No." "Did he ever confide in you about board matters or corporate decisions?" "No." Naomi smiled, then glanced at the board. No further questions. But Evelyn noticed something. A flicker. Naomi's eyes didn't look surprised. They looked satisfied. And when Evelyn sat down, her phone buzzed, just once, a text from unknown. "Good show. Shame it's not the last one." Attached, a signed memo. HR authorization from Andrea Klein, dated 3 weeks ago. But the metadata showed Naomi had prepared the draft and pushed it through. The title? Advance request. Formal resignation draft. Evelyn Monroe. Her name, already written 3 weeks ago, before the photo, before the complaint, before the dinner. Naomi had planned everything. The boardroom emptied slowly. Julian stayed behind, silent, his hands braced against the edge of the polished table. Evelyn stood in the hallway staring at her phone, the HR memo glowing coldly on the screen. Advance request, formal resignation draft, Evelyn Monroe, signed by Naomi Winslow, dated 3 weeks ago. The betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was personal. Naomi hadn't just wanted her gone. She had planned to erase her, before Evelyn ever knew she mattered. Behind her, Naomi's heels echoed on the tile as she exited the boardroom. She didn't look surprised to see Evelyn still there. "Do you want to know why?" Naomi asked softly. Evelyn didn't answer. Naomi leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "I've watched him build this company for 8 years. Watched people pretend to care just to get close to him. Watched him give away pieces of himself to women who didn't see him. Not really. And you do? Evelyn asked. Naomi didn't blink. I've protected him longer than you've known his name. Evelyn felt her heart beat faster. Then why try to destroy him? Naomi straightened. Because love and leadership don't mix, and because he was never meant to give the most vulnerable part of himself to someone who just got here. She walked away before Evelyn could answer. But her words stayed behind, like smoke in the air. That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She went to the only place that had ever truly felt like hers. Her sister Marla's. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and warm laundry. Soft jazz drifted through the rooms. And Marla, older by 5 years, always grounded, always direct, opened the door in pajamas and fuzzy socks. Well, look who remembered she has a family, Marla teased gently, wrapping Evelyn in a long, tight hug. Evelyn finally let herself exhale. An hour later, they sat on the sofa with tea and buttered toast, the only dinner Marla could throw together last minute. I'm tired, Evelyn admitted, of being strong, of wondering if it's all real. Marla looked at her over the rim of her mug. Is it love? Evie? I don't know, Evelyn whispered. But do you want it to be? That was the harder question. Evelyn looked down at the locket resting in her hand. I gave this to him, she said, because he gave me dignity when no one else would. Marla nodded. Then maybe that's what love starts with, not fireworks. Not promises, just someone showing up, again and again, when they don't have to. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She stood, walked to the guest room, and unpacked the small overnight bag she'd brought. Then she pulled out a folded piece of stationery, thick, cream-colored, untouched. She sat at Marla's desk and began to write, quietly, deliberately, with no intention of sending it. Julian, I don't know what we are, and maybe it's too soon to ask, but what I do know is that being near you has made me braver. You saw me when I was invisible, and maybe that's all I'll ever owe you. But if you want me in your world, it can't be because I broke into it. It has to be because I belong there. If I walk away now, will you let me go? Evelyn. She folded the letter carefully, and then she placed it in her purse with no intention of sending it. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at the office with her resignation in hand. Not the one Naomi wrote, her own, typed, signed, dignified. But when she stepped into the building, something was wrong. The front desk staff stared. The elevators buzzed with energy. Her phone began to vibrate again and again. By the time she reached the 7th floor, the damage was done. Her email inbox had exploded. Subject: to the one who saw me. Private letter leaked a screenshot of her letter, the one she never sent, now posted anonymously on a gossip blog. Every word, every vulnerability. Published, public. And above it, Secretary confesses. Feelings for billionaire CEO in private letter. Is the Hartman scandal a love story or a power play? The comments were already rolling in. She wrote him a love letter? Cringe. He'll never look at her again now. This girl's going to lose everything. Her legs gave out before she could reach her desk. She sat down, not out of weakness, but because she knew what had just happened. Not corporate warfare, not romantic fallout. Character assassination. She looked up and saw Julian walking toward her, pale, jaw tight, phone in hand. I didn't leak it, he said, voice raw. I know, she replied, eyes full. But as she reached for the silver locket in her purse, she froze. It was gone. The letter Evelyn never meant to send was now everywhere. It was on news sites, blogs, a segment on morning television. Her private handwritten words twisted into romantic confession or corporate manipulation, depending on who you asked. Being near you has made me braver. If you want me in your world, it can't be because I broke into it. If I walk away now, will you let me go? She hadn't cried, not yet, but her chest hadn't stopped aching since she sat down. Across the office, co-workers avoided her gaze. Some stared openly. A few smirked. One or two, the kind who had always liked her quietly, looked as shaken as she felt. Julian stood beside her. Eyes hard, jaw tight. He kept his voice low. "I have the tech team looking into the leak. You never sent the letter electronically. It had to be—" "I left the physical copy on my desk," Evelyn whispered, realization dawning. "At your sister's?" "No, here, yesterday when I stepped away to HR and her voice caught—" "Someone went through my things," Julian cursed under his breath. "I'll get security footage. This isn't over." But Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and said something he didn't expect. "Let me handle this." He frowned. "You don't have to—" "No," she said firmly. "I do." At noon, Evelyn walked into the staff cafe, packed, loud, buzzing with low conversation and pointed looks. She stepped up onto a low wooden bench beside the bulletin board, cleared her throat. And then, without notes, without preamble, she spoke. "I didn't write that letter for an audience. I didn't write it to manipulate a man. I wrote it because I didn't want to become another woman who swallowed her truth just to stay safe." Conversation stilled. Utensils paused. Heads turned. "You don't have to like me. You don't have to approve of who I sit with, who I work for, or what I feel. But if I've learned anything in the last month, it's that shame only works when you keep it quiet. So, here I am. Not quiet, not broken. A beat." She took one breath and stepped down. Her hands shook, but she didn't fall. Behind her, someone began to clap. One voice, then two, then a dozen. Slow, hesitant, but real. Julian stood at the cafe door. He didn't say a word. He just nodded. And the moment she passed him, he moved aside, not to protect her, not to lead her, to let her walk through on her own. Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat at her desk in silence. The inbox had changed. Fewer headlines, more apologies. Quiet emails from co-workers she barely knew. That was brave. "I'm sorry for assuming. You gave me courage today." She closed the screen and leaned back in her chair. And that's when she saw it. That afternoon, a small white envelope sitting beside her keyboard. No stamp, no logo. Inside was the silver locket and a note. "You left this behind, but I think it belongs to you, not him. N.W. Naomi." Evelyn stared at the handwriting. Sharp, elegant, unmistakable. No apology, no warmth, but no malice either. A quiet surrender. She fastened the locket around her neck once more, where it belonged. By 4 p.m., Evelyn got the final email. Subject: Board vote imminent. 6 p.m., final review of internal conduct concerns and leadership ethics. CEO status under review. Julian's future was hanging by a thread, and this time so was hers. Because if he lost, if they ruled against him, it wouldn't just be his job. The headline wouldn't be about him, it would be about her. Secretary brings down billionaire. Affair in the workplace, career ruined. Love letter costs them everything. And still. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, she stood outside the boardroom doors, waiting to be called in. Julian arrived moments later, suit sharp, eyes calm, but as he reached for the door, he paused. "Evelyn." She turned. He looked at her like he was memorizing her. "If I lose this, it wasn't because of you. And if I win, it still won't be." Her throat tightened. Before she could answer, the boardroom door opened. "Mr. Hartman, Ms. Monroe, the board is ready for you." They stepped inside together, 15 people. A long table, no cameras, no press, just silence. Until the chairwoman, Pearl Edison, spoke. "We are prepared to cast a final vote on Mr. Hartman's leadership status. 12 members present, 1 absentee. Decision will be made based on presented evidence and board majority. Let us proceed." One by one they voted. Some eyes were kind, others neutral. Julian never looked at Evelyn. He didn't flinch. But when the votes ended, 6 for him, 5 against, Pearl Edison looked up. The 12th vote will determine the final outcome. It belongs to the board member unable to attend in person. She's reviewing testimony now and will cast her vote remotely within the hour. Her name is Sasha Laurent. Despite council recommending recusal, the bylaws allowed remote voting if the member disclosed the conflict. Sasha disclosed, and the chair noted it on record. Evelyn's breath caught. Julian's ex, the woman in red, the one who tried to frame him. Now she held the deciding vote. The boardroom emptied slowly, but not completely. Julian and Evelyn were asked to wait. Pearl Edison, the chairwoman, gave them a calm, measured look. Sasha Laurent has the final vote. She's reviewing the testimony now. We've given her full access. Legal documents, footage, statements, and the letter. Evelyn flinched at the last word. The letter. Even now. Her words weren't hers anymore. Pearl added, "She may request to speak with one of you before casting her vote. If she does, we will notify you immediately." And then they were alone. The room was too quiet, too sterile, no windows, no time, just waiting. Julian sat at the far end of the long table, elbows on his knees, hands folded. Evelyn sat on the opposite end, stiff, silent, locket cold against her skin. After a long moment she spoke. What was she like? Before all this, when you loved her? Julian didn't look up, but his voice was steady. She was brilliant, strategic, magnetic. The room turned when she walked in. Evelyn nodded. Eyes cast down. Sounds like a force. She was, he said, but she never trusted softness. Not in herself, not in me. He finally looked at Evelyn. And you? Make quiet feel strong. Even now? Especially now. A long silence followed. Then Julian's phone lit up on the table. Unknown number, no text. Just one ring, he answered. This is Julian Hartman. A woman's voice crackled faintly through the speaker, calm, controlled, familiar. It's Sasha, he froze, then pressed a button. Speakerphone. I want to speak with Evelyn, Sasha said. Alone. Julian looked to her, questioning. Evelyn nodded once. He stood and stepped out, silent. Evelyn, Sasha said smoothly, you're braver than I expected. You're more dangerous than I expected, Evelyn replied, voice calm. Sasha laughed softly. Julian always had a weakness for women who looked like they wouldn't survive a gust of wind, and then somehow held up the whole sky. Is that what this is? Jealousy? No, Sasha said. This is legacy. She paused, then added with unnerving honesty, I spent 4 years building a future with him, a future I thought I owned. And you showed up with your soft voice and $10 purse, and he handed you the last piece of himself. Evelyn swallowed. So you wanted to destroy me? No. I wanted to remind him who built his crown, but now? Sasha sighed. Now I see the cost. A pause crackled over the line. They're going to ask you to speak one last time, before I vote. Why? Because I requested it. Say whatever you want, Sasha continued. But I want to hear one thing in your voice when you do. Not ambition, not apology, just truth. And then she hung up. 20 minutes later, the board reassembled. Pearl Edison turned to Evelyn. You've been requested to give a final statement before the deciding vote. Evelyn stood slowly. Her knees were shaking. But her voice was not. I'm not here to defend love or explain proximity. I'm not the kind of woman who climbs through windows or steals crowns. I came to this company carrying a locket, a worn purse, and a mother who needed me. And I leave it, if I must, with the same things. But what I won't leave behind is my voice. She reached into her blouse and held out the silver locket, this time in front of everyone. This was my mother's. She gave it to me when her lungs started to fail. Told me, speak when they expect silence. Stand when they expect collapse. She looked to Julian. His eyes never left her, and if this company falls without him, it's not because of who he loved. It's because you couldn't tell the difference between scandal and sacrifice. Silence. Full. Deep. Then, Pearl stood and turned to the screen behind her. We will now receive the final vote from board member Sasha Laurent. The screen flashed once, then again, then connected. Sasha's voice filled the room. After reviewing all testimonies and evidence, including the public leak, the HR reports, and Evelyn Monroe's private letter, I cast my vote in favor of retaining Julian Hartman as CEO. Relief bloomed, but only for a second. On one condition. Every board member turned to face the screen. Effective immediately, Julian Hartman must formally recuse himself from all decisions involving Evelyn Monroe's employment or department. If he declines, I withdraw my vote. Condition recorded to limit liability exposure per counsel's advice. Gasps. Julian stood. That's blackmail, Pearl turned to him. It's legal, and it would protect the company from future personal liability. Evelyn looked down at the locket in her hand. Sacrifice, not scandal. Julian's eyes found hers. The room held its breath. Pearl turned to him. Mr. Hartman, do you accept the condition? He didn't answer. He turned and looked at Evelyn. Not as a CEO, not as a man saving face, but as someone about to lose what matters most. Julian stood frozen in the boardroom, every eye on him. Sasha's voice still echoed through the speakers. Retain your title, keep your crown, but lose her. That's the deal. Pearl Edison repeated calmly. Mr. Hartman, do you accept the condition? Julian turned to Evelyn. Her face was calm, but her eyes were wide, brimming, not with desperation, but understanding, because she knew what he was about to say. He didn't speak to the board, he spoke only to her. I'd rather lose everything than lose you quietly. A ripple of gasps passed through the room. Pearl blinked. Mr. Hartman, are you declining the terms? Julian finally turned back to the board, voice steady, low, controlled. No, I accept. Evelyn's breath caught. He continued, hands clasped behind his back. I'll recuse myself from all involvement in Ms. Monroe's employment, effective immediately. Not because I was forced, not because I was guilty, but because she deserves the chance to stand or rise on her own. He turned back to Evelyn, then stepped aside, leaving her standing alone. For the second time in her life, she had been let go, but this time it was with dignity, and that made it hurt more. Evelyn didn't cry. Not until the elevator doors closed behind her, not until the silence folded around her like a second skin. She didn't collapse. She didn't run. She simply went home, packed a small bag, and took a cab to the only place she needed to be. Her mother's hospital room. When she entered, Teresa was sitting up. Pale but lucid, her frail hands gently folding an old quilt across her lap. You're here, Teresa said softly. I didn't know where else to go, Evelyn whispered, sitting beside her. Teresa reached out and touched the locket resting against Evelyn's collarbone. You gave it to him, she said knowingly. Evelyn nodded. And then I had to take it back. Her mother smiled faintly. Sometimes we loan strength, sometimes we reclaim it. They sat in silence for a while, just breathing, just being. Then Teresa gestured to her bedside drawer. There's something for you. Evelyn opened it. Inside was a small envelope with her name on it. The handwriting was weak, but elegant. Evie, you've spent your whole life trying to keep the world together for everyone else. But the day you stop needing permission to rise is the day you become unstoppable. Love doesn't always come in the shape we dreamed. Sometimes it shows up quietly, steps back with grace, and says, I see you. If he saw you, truly saw you, he'll find you again. If not, you're still whole. You were always whole. Mom tears finally came, not loud, not messy, just necessary. She held her mother's hand until the monitors began to beep softly, signaling sleep. Then Evelyn stood, looked out the window, and breathed. The city was still alive, still cold, still fast, but she didn't feel lost in it anymore. 2 days later, she typed a letter of resignation, not because she was ashamed, but because she was finished there. Julian never came looking, and she never asked why. Until one evening, on her porch step, a simple white box arrived. Inside was a mug from their first coffee, a folded napkin with her handwriting, the first time she'd written her number for him after the scandal, and the locket, tied in a velvet ribbon. At the bottom of the box, one note. I never kept what didn't belong to me, but this was always yours, Jay. She closed the box slowly, then sat on her porch, wrapped in a sweater, Lily curling up beside her, purring softly, as if she too understood the weight of endings and beginnings. She let the silence say what no man had dared say in words. You let me go. With love. But the story wasn't over, because the next morning, Evelyn opened her email to find something she never expected. Subject: Are you available for a freelance position? From Julian Hartman. Sent from personal address. Not company email. I may not be allowed to work with you, but that doesn't mean we can't create something new. I'm building something. And if you're ready, I'd like to build it with you. 1 week later, Evelyn stood outside a quiet brick building tucked between 2 trees on the east side of the city. No corporate signs, no gold plaques. Just a handwritten chalkboard near the door that read, Start small, build slow, dream anyway. She hadn't answered Julian's email. Not right away, because something about it had felt different. Not like a rope thrown from a sinking ship, but like a door. And today, she walked through it. Inside, the space was flooded with warm light. Tall ceilings, exposed beams, plants on wide windowsills, shelves lined with books, sketch pads, architectural models. At the center of it all, Julian. He stood behind a large wooden table, sleeves rolled, blueprints spread in front of him, reading glasses slipping slightly down his nose. And for the first time, he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man who had come back to himself. He looked up and smiled, but he didn't walk toward her. He waited, letting her cross the room on her own terms. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly. I almost didn't, she replied. What changed your mind? She set a folded piece of paper on the table, her mother's letter. If he saw you, truly saw you, he'll find you again. Julian picked it up, eye scanning, then gently handed it back. I never stopped seeing you, he said. I just had to step back far enough to realize I don't want to lead you. I want to build with you. She looked around. So this is what you meant. Julian nodded. A foundation for the next thing, for people like you, the overlooked. You're the underestimated, the ones who never had a seat at the table. We're starting a think space, a creative incubator, small business mentorship, and I want you to run it with me. Evelyn blinked. Me? You understand dignity, voice, second chances. You didn't break when they pushed, you rose. She let the words settle. She didn't smile, not yet. I'll help build it, she said, but only if we're clear. Julian waited. This isn't charity. This isn't apology. This isn't a second round of almost. He stepped closer. It's not. If I step in, she continued, I step in as your partner, not your project, not your secret, not your weakness. Julian placed his hand gently on the table, palm open. Then, let's build it together. The first project began small, an online scholarship program for women over 40 returning to the workforce. Then a grant for single mothers launching handmade businesses. Then a physical space for women-led teams who couldn't afford rent in the city. Each step they took, Evelyn was there, and Julian let her lead. Sometimes their hands brushed when they passed papers across the desk. Sometimes she brought him tea with too much honey. Because you never remember to eat. Sometimes they left the lights on too long after closing, and on one such night, in the quiet hum of a space they had built, Evelyn reached into her purse and took out the silver locket one last time. I used to wear this because I was afraid I'd disappear. Julian looked up from the papers. And now? Evelyn walked over, opened the locket. Inside, she'd added a new photo of her and her mother on the hospital bed, heads pressed together, smiling through the machines. Now, she said, I wear it to remember where I began. She took it off and gently hung it on a small brass hook by the office entrance, beside a sign that read, "This place was built by hands that shook, by hearts that broke, and by people who showed up anyway." Julian crossed the room. Slowly, he didn't touch her. He just stood there, the air between them full of every word they had never said. "If I asked again," he said, voice low, "would you stay?" She smiled, just barely. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, there was no scandal, no audience. Just two people standing in a room they built, not trying to fix each other, not trying to prove anything, just there, together. And so, it wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a ring. It wasn't some sweeping kiss under the rain. It was a mug of tea, still warm. It was an office they kept unlocking. It was a locket on a hook near the door where every woman who walked in could see it. Where every woman could ask herself, am I disappearing? Or am I just beginning? 2 years later, a woman walked into the same brick building Evelyn once stepped into with shaking hands. She wore modest shoes, carried a worn portfolio against her chest, and looked like life had asked too much of her. And she was still showing up. Near the entrance, she paused. There it was again, the sign. Start small, build slow, dream anyway. She stepped inside. The room smelled of lavender and paper, soft light, warm wood, hope. Just by the door she noticed a small brass hook, and on it an old silver locket, gently open. Inside were two photos, one of a young woman with tearful eyes, one of an older woman in a hospital bed, smiling beneath an oxygen tube. She turned to the receptionist. "Whose locket is that?" The woman behind the desk smiled softly. It belonged to Evelyn Monroe. She said she carried it until the day she didn't have to anymore. "Does she still work here?" The receptionist pointed toward the glass office in the back. Through the window, Evelyn and Julian sat at a table, papers in front of them, tea cooling between them, the glow of lamplight around them, still, focused, peaceful. "She doesn't work here," the receptionist replied with a knowing smile. "She is here." Maybe the love that lasts isn't loud. Maybe the most powerful redemption isn't public. Maybe you don't need to be rescued, you just need to be seen, and to start from exactly where you are. Have you ever felt invisible and kept going anyway? Then maybe, like Evelyn, you're not starting over. Maybe you're just starting right. The end. If this story moved you, even a little, leave a comment below. Would you have walked away or walked in? Like the story, rate it from 0 to 10, and don't forget to subscribe for the next modern fairy tale built on truth, dignity, and just a little bit of magic. See you in the next story. Thanks for watching.